I've played the Yakuza series a bit too much, and my rent is 3 days overdue, so what better way to put my excessive amounts of trivial knowledge to use than by making a ranking video out of all of the final bosses in this franchise's 21-year repertoire. But we're not gonna be ranking how well the boss works narratively or how good they feel to fight. Everyone and their Oyabun has done one of those. Today's task is reserved only for someone of a particularly high caliber of unemployment. We're ranking these guys based on how much I like no-damaging them. Keyword, how much I like no-damaging them. This is going to be an incredibly dumb and biased ranking. If you know me, you should already know who's in the number 1 spot. Even then, this is still only a half-serious ranking at best, so don't get mad at me if I give your favorite fight a low score, or give a fight you don't like a high score based on some arbitrary criteria. Speaking of said arbitrary criteria, the way I will be ranking these fights is by assigning each of them a score out of 10 in 5 different categories, before then tallying their total scores out of 50. The 5 ranking categories are as follows. Game mechanics. How good the general mechanics of the game are and how conducive they are to no damage. Player moveset. How fun and useful the player moveset or movesets are and how well they synergize with the game mechanics. Boss mechanics. How well the actual boss plays. How unique and enjoyable of a fight it is and how well it utilizes the game's mechanics. Difficulty. How well balanced the fight is. A good boss is challenging, but not too much. Too easy or too hard are both bad. These fights will also be judged based on the hardest difficulty in their respective games that still allows for retries. And finally, aura. How good the fight feels. How cool it is to both play and watch. I'm sure this category will not have any negative repercussions on the ranking whatsoever. And with the rules of this video fully outlined, I suppose we get right into this ranking with our bottom spot.
Fuck you! You fucking dick! Always naysaying! Everything I'd create!
Amongst all of the encounters that this series has created to round out its numerous entries, many of them have been excellent showcases of just what this series is capable of. At its best, Yakuza is a masterclass of human drama, and is able to pack some of the greatest and most compelling storytelling that I've ever seen into the simple act of 2 people beating the shit out of each other. But they can't all be winners. This series does have its fair share of stinkers, and unfortunately for one of them, there has to be someone declared the stinkiest of them all. And it's none other than... Well, to start with the game mechanics of the Majima Saga, there's nothing. You can't do anything except hit people, if they feel like it. Unlike, say, Yakuza 1, hitting people feels like shit. And also unlike that game, Kiwami 2 is a game where you're expected to be faster than a tortoise in cryogenic stasis. K2's whole thing is stun combos. That's the only thing this game has going for it. Guess who does not have a move that stuns people? 0 out of 10. What if we took one of the slowest styles from Zero, slapped it into the game where your attacks constantly get blocked, removed all of the gimmicks that circumvent that issue, and provided no way to interact with the game's main combo type? At least you have the demon fire counter and your quick step attacks are kind of usable, I guess. Majima's heavy kick is also kind of funny with how it just decks people immediately, but funny isn't gonna cut it in this case, pal. 1 out of 10. It's Tamashiro 2. That moveset does not work outside of Yakuza 3 and wasn't even great in that game to begin with. Ibuchi will inevitably dodge anything you throw at him that is not a quick step attack because your attacks are so slow. If you're too close to him, he can also instantly end your run because these double kicks that he does actually do damage, unlike the ones in Yakuza 3. He has like 1 counter opening, I guess, and he doesn't have that much health at least. 2 out of 10. This is a gun boss in Yakuza Kiwami 2. You are playing as Majima. If you were any faster, this fight wouldn't be too bad, but you're gonna fail a lot to random gunshots. But once again, at least he doesn't have that much health. 3 out of 10. The song and the intro are cool. Everything else is pitiful. The most aura that Ibuchi has is his occupation of the cuck chair spot on Takehito Koyasu's IMDb page. Majima is also a cool character, but seeing him in this geriatric of a state is not doing much for him. 3 out of 10, 9 out of 50 overall.
Focus M. Bowser's got the power stars and you know what that means.
Yeah, trouble.
I'm not giving this guy the cool edit. Regular Takechi has the same music and action sequences, so I'm gonna save it all for him later. What if we took Ishin's game mechanics, which were already mediocre, and made every boss have constant super armor and magic fuck you powers? 1 out of 10. Technically speaking, your moveset in Ishin Kiwami is an improvement from the original. Your combo speed is faster, and like, Brawler 2 ST is a gut-stunning move now. You have more dodges in Wild Dance, and you can do the style switch attack in any style too. It's technically better than the original, so 8 out of 10. Original Takechi is already polarizing enough as is. His first and last phases are excellent, but his second phase is terrible. His second phase is bad because he can shoot you from anywhere at a moment's notice, and it's extremely difficult to actually land hits on him. I wonder if that's familiar. Ishin Kiwami just turns every phase into phase 2. 0! In some ways, this is the most difficult fight simply because this game does not function. You're forced to stay in Wild Dance for 90% of the fight until the game decides to let you do a 3-second back combo, and it's also the only style that can reliably avoid Takechi's homing electricity powers, not to mention the fact that he can still shoot you at will in his second phase, and his dive shot no longer has a consistent pattern. 2 out of 10. Not only does this fight look worse than the original, not only does it play worse than the original, and not only does it remove the moon from the final phase of the fight, but this game just slaps Shibusawa's face onto Takechi. What is the connection? Kiryu fucking hates Shibusawa, and I'm supposed to believe that they're now brothers who are fighting each other reluctantly, only for them to talk about how much they love each other once it's all over? You're passing off this suspiciously Shibusawa-shaped Takechi skinwalker that can summon electricity and evil demon swords as the real Takechi, and you still have the gall to use Assassination of Bodhisattva on top of that? Negative 1 out of 10. 10 out of 50 overall.
I'm a chud, I'm a chud, I'm a fat little chud, playing lead all day until the sun comes up.
Yakuza 5 is actual doo-doo when it comes to no damaging. All of the cool stuff from the previous games has either been removed or lobotomized, and what we get in return are wall splats. Knockdown combos kinda sorta exist, but they're super restrictive, so good luck doing much with them. Trying to do wall splats is about as straightforward and exciting as divorce proceedings. Everything in Yakuza 5 is working against you. Even back combos no longer function. Technically, not the worst game in this aspect, but certainly the one that feels like it hates the player the most. 3 out of 10. Akiyama got giga-nerfed going into this game as a huge overcompensation for how broken he was in Yakuza 4. He's got some okay wall splat options, but very few setups, and his abundance of hits already makes the terrible back combo system even worse. Some of his potentially useful moves are overridden by launchers when in heat mode. While Akiyama technically didn't change all that much from the previous game, the engine changes disproportionately hurt him. 4 out of 10. What if you were fighting Munakata, but instead of him passively shooting a gun in the back, he was constantly chasing you like Jack the Ripper with a knife? Group bosses like this tend to be very unfun to no damage, and especially so when the boss has zero chill and constantly harasses you while you try to deal with the ads. One unique thing about this fight is that you don't actually have to kill everyone, just Kanai. There is some freedom in how many of them you want to kill before focusing on him. Akiyama at least has the mobility to deal with crowds. Though unfortunately, Kanai himself is a little bastard. In his knife phase, he doesn't leave you alone at all and is super annoying to deal with. In his unarmed phase, he's one of the easiest bosses in the game. He's still got knockdown immunity though, meaning that Akiyama can't do jack shit against him. You can't even use airstrike, which is Akiyama's main gimmick in this game. Comboing with Akiyama in Yakuza 5 is a lot like chemotherapy. Actively detrimental to your health, but the best option given the cancerous growths that are Akiyama's boss fights in this game. If we choose to extend the metaphor, then Final Kanai might as well be an open-air asbestos mine. If it wasn't for those few little things that make the fight slightly less terrible, this would have a 0. 1 out of 10. As I said, there is some degree of modularity in this fight's difficulty which helps, but this fight is still gonna be hard as shit no matter what. But not in a sorta fun and challenging way like some of the other fights later in the list. Akiyama can do crowd control, but it's not fun. Akiyama can do things against Kanai, but it's not fun. Put this man out of his misery. 4 out of 10. As for the aura of this fight, it's Kanai. One of his most notable moments is when he gets his skull caved in by a fire extinguisher. No intro is lame, but panning shots are kinda cool for big group fights, so it's fine. End of Rematch is also okay, but far from the best final boss theme. There's just no sauce whatsoever in the gameplay. It's Munakata with none of the aura. Why is this game touting this polka dot tie-donning salaryman as a serious threat when this is now the 4th time that he's been flattened by an intermittent homeless man with chronic bronchitis? 2 out of 10. 14 out of 50 overall.
Because when this stuff gets going, it smells like dead bodies.
The endだ.
Well, Dead Souls is a third-person shooter. A third-person shooter with some rather odd controls. Personally, I quite enjoy it, even if it is a bit obtuse at times, but you do kinda just shoot. That's all there is to it. 5 out of 10. Unlike the other multi-protagonist games, only Kiryu gets a final boss this time around. Once again, you're just shooting people, so there's not much difference between characters other than what their primary weapon is. For Kiryu, it's sniper rifles, and they're fine. Nice and strong. Not much else to say. A 4, I guess. Oikazuchi Omega is a pretty lame fight even by Dead Souls standards. You're literally just shooting a stationary target. Sometimes you have to dodge some extremely telegraphed attacks. There is a segment where you have to aim and throw grenades in its mouth, which, like, it's not hard, but it's something, I guess. Just give it a 3. This is the single easiest final boss to no damage in the entire series. Or it would be if it wasn't literally impossible. This is maybe the only boss in the series that cannot be no damaged because the QTE makes you progressively lose health. No matter how much you mash, you will always take at least a little bit of damage. This fight already wasn't scoring high in this category due to being pitifully easy, but the fact that it is so theoretically trivial, but still impossible, is more insulting than anything else. 0 out of 10. This fight has a lot of bells and whistles. The fact that you fight a giant zombie monster on top of the Millennium Tower is pretty cool, and while Return to Nothingness isn't exactly playing into the hype angle, it is a good track. The ending QTE and the fact that you basically just nuke the Millennium Tower is pretty raw, but all of that window dressing is only going to do so much to bring up how snoozer the actual gameplay is. 5 out of 10. 17 out of 50 overall.
My dark passenger is coming out of me.
Your what is coming out of you?
My dark passenger.
As previously stated, Yakuza 5 gets a 3 for its game mechanics. Of the two games where Saejima is playable, this is the one where he isn't on crack. His base moveset has still technically improved, and he has an easy stun option in the form of Tiger Dragon Drop. Even with the buffs, he's still easily the least interesting of the characters in Yakuza 5. He doesn't have any of the crazy shit from Yakuza 4 anymore, not that it would help in this engine, and his wall splats are extremely simple and linear. 4 out of 10. Majima was designed in a lab to be the most anti-no-damage boss in the entire series' history. As if playing as Saejima was not already bad enough, this arena has no walls, meaning no wall splats. Even if it did have walls, Majima is immune to wall splats due to having access to Komaki cat-like reflexes. Even if he didn't, he only has 3 health bars, which in Yakuza 5 means he dies if you so much as utter the word Yume in his general vicinity. And even if he did have more health, he still has a bajillion QTEs that would interrupt your combos and the entire Shadow Clone phase that grinds the pacing to a screeching halt. Majima is just going to keel over and die in 2 minutes, and half of that will just be you watching the QTEs play out. Only not a 1, because I'd rather a bad and easy boss over a bad and hard one. 2 out of 10. Majima literally has an attack that is basically just him screaming, "Yoo-hoo! Come counter me!" and he has the durability of an anemic housefly. The only part of this fight that is at all challenging is the Shadow Clone phase, which can be a bit much for Saejima to keep up with, but is far from a big deal. It's a stupidly short and easy fight with a moderate difficulty spike halfway through. 4 out of 10. The circumstances that lead to this fight happening at all are extremely stupid. The fight is also as dark as a Kiwami 3 cutscene for some reason. I like the song, and the intro and QTEs are all cool, especially the last one where Saejima just straight up grabs Majima's knife, but the fight itself being about as bland as hardtack just gives nothing for the cool stuff to latch onto. 4 out of 10. 17 out of 50 overall.
No, don't do it! No! He fell off the fucking building!
If you saw the Kiwami 3 case study, you know how I feel about this game's combat system. It is genuinely baffling that they looked at Gaiden and Pirate Yakuza and decided to make it even worse, to the point that the only games that are worse in this regard are Mario If Nintendo Locked the Fuck In and Kiwami 2's Mad Dog-shaped tumor. Let's take the hardly functional juggles from Pirate Yakuza, make bosses almost entirely immune to them in heat mode aside from one random launcher, and make them literally not work half the time. Ground combos kind of exist, but only outside of heat mode, and they're still subject to the same overly restrictive combo limit. Bosses are still gonna be in heat mode for most of the fight, and your best bet is to go for one of very few short back combos that work around 30% of the time. That, or hit the boss with about 20 consecutive stun attacks until you can finally hit them while they sit there frozen in place like a Moai statue. 2 out of 10. To once more paraphrase my Kiwami 3 video, Dragon of Dojima is hardly functional outside of its good hold attacks and dodges. Its rush combo is genuinely abysmal and does nothing. UQ style is significantly more interesting due to having a functional launcher and attacks that actually do things. Though, when it comes to a 1v1 boss like Mine, you need to be in DoD most of the time because UQ style is slow as shit, and at least it has some basic back combos. Technically, these styles aren't that terrible, especially the UQ style, and they are mostly just brought down by the awful combat system this game has. Things like hold attack and block cancels are cool, but they're not gonna boost the score too high. 6 out of 10. Kiwami Mine is not that bad. His Phase 1 moveset is mostly just a copy of his Dark Ties player moveset, which, unlike most player movesets, actually translates decently well into a boss fight. His second phase moveset is just Dark Awakening, which I have some opinions on. But either way, this is the only boss in the game to not have a legally designated combo period, meaning you're fighting a brick wall for the last quarter of the fight. This moveset isn't that hard outside of the mortal attack with insane rubber banding, but it's super boring to be restricted to doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Not to mention the fact that you have like 12 heat actions at your disposal. Unlike most other Dragon Engine games, the flexibility you had with attack upgrades no longer exists. Maxing out your attack is mandatory if you don't want the fight to be 20 minutes long. But probably the most insulting part of the fight is in how it completely removes most of what made the original version interesting. You know about the whole heat cycling gimmick that made Mine one of the best bosses in the whole series? None of that anymore. You will play a significantly worse version of this game you enjoy, and you will like it. 4 out of 10. The difficulty of this fight entirely depends on whether or not your attack is maxed out. If it is, then it's a mildly tricky fight that is still probably easier than the original, but if not, then be prepared for one of the worst endurance tests in the series. Unlike other bosses that were improved by the ability to choose how many attack upgrades you wanted, this one forces you to have them all if you don't want an absolutely miserable experience. It's not like it's even that hard if you don't have the upgrades, it's just long and tedious. Neither of these movesets are that challenging. Technically okay difficulty-wise, but I'm taking off points for the lack of flexibility that every other Dragon Engine game provides. 5 out of 10. As much as I love OG Mine, they really chewed up and spat out all of the cool stuff he had in this version. His fight is just not nearly as cool. His theme is alright, but it feels like it's doing too much, and everything just looks like shit. Doesn't help that this game puts me to sleep every time I play it. Mine is still a cool character, I guess. Except for the fact that they ruined his entire arc with the Daidoji bullshit! Technically, it's not that bad, but I feel like I need to give a 0 just on principle. I'll be generous and make it a 1 because it's still Mine. 18 out of 50 overall just because of how much he insults me.
Oh, that bass is just nice and creamy, isn't it?
This segment was supposed to be about Tenkai from Kenzen, but in trying to import a new save into RPCS3, I somehow irreversibly corrupted all of my Kenzen saves. So, in lieu of me having to replay the entire game again in a language I don't understand, I'm just going to steal footage from my friend I'm on the edge of my seat. Thank you. Kenzan is kinda just a beta version of Yakuza 3 with swords. There's not much in terms of high-level tech this time around, but back combos and such feel very nice to do, and the overall controls have been refined further from the PS2 games. It's still not as good as some of the subsequent games, but it was a step in the right direction. 7 out of 10. Technically the first game to have multiple styles, but also the most lopsided and unbalanced by far. The dual sword style is very well made and versatile. The single sword style is decent, if a bit one-dimensional, and the unarmed and heavy sword styles are just not very good. There is still at least some variety to be found. 7 out of 10. Tenkai is a victory lap boss. He's a complete goober that's annoying but ultimately rather easy. He's a gun boss with very poor defenses who is very prone to being looped. He can heal, he can disrupt combos with poison powder which stuns you, and he can, of course, shoot you. There's plenty of cover behind the rocks, and you have a very clear opening when he goes to reload. He can react very quickly after being hit, which can be annoying, but this can be easily avoided with the 4ST command grab in the dual sword style. There's very little that makes Tenkai interesting at all. 3 out of 10. You will lose to this guy 10 times max due to him landing a stray pot shot. After you learn the pattern, you'll be fine. This guy is meant to be obscenely easy, even on the harder difficulties. But like I said earlier, I'd still rather an easy fight over an unfair and excessively difficult one. 4 out of 10. $21 out of 50 overall.
You have my full support. Down with big government!
Masato is not on this list, but this is where he'd be if he was.
I have planted a bomb at Tatalia High.
And there's nothing we can do.
There's nothing we can do.
Yakuza 2 is just Yakuza 1 but better. Shocking. Combos are still somewhat limited and reliant on certain equipment items, but even then, scrapping still feels very fun, especially when you unlock the quickstep cancel. The health cap has been increased for bosses, but being faster and having stronger heat actions across the board balances it out. 6 out of 10. Your moveset is basically the same as Yakuza 1, but faster. You can actually turn around, and you actually have reversals, and the leg grab is now a thing too. You have more heat actions this time around, but still relatively few compared to future games. But all around, this is just a floatier and much better feeling version of Yakuza 1 Kiryu. 8 out of 10. Too bad you can't do any of that cool stuff on Ryuji. If you so much as tap the square button in his general direction, he will immediately counterattack, making basic attack strings extremely risky. Doesn't help that he gains super armor at the tail end of the fight, meaning that any attempt to bait any counters becomes inconsistent, and even just hitting him is a non-option. No damaging this fight without cheese basically hinges on the Hercules gloves, an item that makes grabs last longer, grabs being your only option for consistent damage. This is manageable when you have the Hercules gloves, but if you don't, Ryuji breaks out extremely quickly and will counter any grab attempts from the front, meaning you have to land back grabs, which will sometimes just break out of immediately. Grabs and Komaki moves are basically the only things that you can do to Ryuji, which is extremely repetitive and not fun. Ryuji is not a boss meant to be overcome. He is meant to be endured. And while I respect the commitment to making this fight feel like a battle of equals, it was done at the cost of a good gameplay experience. While the Kiwami rendition of this fight may have overcorrected for the mistakes made here, it was at least designed to be a much more reasonable encounter that doesn't rely on negating the majority of your options for the sake of narrative weight. 1 out of 10. The difficulty of this fight is dependent on how you choose to approach it. Tiger Drop makes it a piece of cake, but not counting cheese strategies, you can either go for grab spam with the Hercules gloves, which is not very fun, but also not that difficult, or you can try to do a more involved no damage by actually trying to fight him normally, at which point this may be the hardest 1v1 fight to no damage in the entire series. There's a big difference between a hard boss fight being technically challenging and straight up cheap. Ryuji falls into the latter camp, and the only non-cheesy way to mitigate his issues is overly restrictive and not at all interesting. But unlike some of the bottom-tier boss fights below him, at least a consistent strategy exists. 2 out of 10. The final Ryuji fight is a far cry from how bombastic and hype many subsequent final bosses are, and it goes for a much more somber tone. In this case, I think the Ryuji fight works quite well due to how the game hypes up this final encounter. The idea of them having to prove which one is the strongest is a running theme throughout the game, and it's set up in such a way that makes this ostensibly dissonant tone work in its favor. The desire to settle their rivalry once and for all comes before all else, and even with certain death just minutes away, there is still only room for one dragon. RGG's decision to design the fight the way they did makes sense from a story perspective, which is just about the only positive thing I can say about it. Other than that, while the fight does have one QTE that is locked behind getting hit, it has 2 others which are not. The first one isn't guaranteed to activate, but the second one is the first instance of a final boss having a fight-ending QTE. Both of these, but especially the fight ender, are really cool. Even with all of the cool stuff backing it up, every no damage of this fight is still boring as hell. It's very clear this fight wasn't meant to be no damaged, and doing so actively works against its design. 6 out of 10. 23 out of 50 overall.
Fucking Tendo. When that guy sits...
This is an RPG, and a pretty basic one at that. My old college roommate made a better RPG for his coding class with my MS Paint OCs. You can technically no damage this game by spamming a ton of items and maxing out your agility stat. Is it that fun? Not really. I'm also of the opinion that this game plays like shit to begin with, and Infinite Wealth is way better, but I'll try not to let my bias be too bad on this one. It's very difficult to rank this game on the same grading scale as the real-time games, especially since I have not no-damaged it, nor have the desire to do so. But considering how restrictive the game can be, especially with harder bosses like Tendo, it's probably not good. Take this and all of the other RPG entries with a grain of salt. 3 out of 10. This category doesn't really make any sense in the context of an RPG, both since you play as multiple characters at the same time, which you can swap out, and because each of their movesets can be endlessly customized to have whatever you want. This would sort of make sense if I was talking about Masato, but he doesn't count, and the only reason I bothered to mention him is because he's technically after Tendo, despite being more of a narrative victory lap rather than an actual boss encounter. My video, my rules. Don't be mad when Kyoya and Kojiro don't show up either. There are a few fights where this category in particular just doesn't really work, so for those I'm just going to take the raw score out of 40 for the other 4 categories and multiply it to get a relative score out of 50. Not applicable out of 10. Tendo's main gimmick is his insta-kill attack, but every attack is functionally an insta-kill in a no-damage context. That just leaves Tendo as a huge damage sponge with only one weakness to ice, which is the most uncommon type in the game. Also, he resists nearly everything. He's technically kind of impossible to no damage on Legend, as the only way to reliably dodge everything is to max out your agility stat, which requires dozens and possibly hundreds of hours of grinding, but at the end of the day, it's really just a long numbers game. Still kinda difficult to rank, but 5 out of 10. Once again, the main challenge in normal gameplay is dealing with God's right hand, but that move is indistinguishable from all the other ones in this context, so the difficulty just comes from how much health this guy has. It's also highly dependent on how you approach it. How many broken skills do you want to bring, and how much dough are you willing to cough up for pound mates? It's potentially very easy or very hard, so 5, I guess. I don't know, man, it's okay. I like the song and the setting, and Ichiban is cool and whatnot. Minus a point for the corny party chat that breaks up the fight. But man, Tendo is kind of a nothing character who just aura farms for a little bit and then dies. 6 out of 10. 19 out of 40, or 23.75 out of 50 overall. Same engine as Kiwami 3, 2 out of 10. Mina is definitely an improvement from Kiryu in some ways. Both of his movesets feel like they were made with this engine in mind, sort of. His shootboxing style requires so many hits before you get to the more interesting parts of the rush combo that bosses might armor through it before you're even done. You might be able to land 5ST on a boss's back if you're lucky, but most of the time you can't land 6ST, which is your only launcher in the shootboxing style except for the True Crane Beast Slayer ripoff. I get the idea behind having a super long rush combo, but unlike with the rush style where certain finishers were only accessible later in the combo, both of the games that style is in don't have a hit budget for their combos. Dark Awakening, as much as I dislike it in concept, is better due to having a functional rush combo with a really good and fast launcher. The later hits still have the Dragon Boost problem of forcing you to use the Bounding Throw variants even when you don't want to, but it's whatever, I guess. The fact that you can only use this style for a maximum of 20 seconds at a time is absolutely criminal, though. It's a damn shame. I'd probably like playing as Mine a lot more if he wasn't confined to Yakuza Kiwami 3-second combos. 8 out of 10. This dude is a bum. They couldn't think of any kind of interesting moveset for him to use, so they just gave him a slightly beefed up version of the nondescript bat moveset from Lost Judgment. It's very mediocre. Some of his hitboxes are pretty big and he has a lot of unblockables which can catch you off guard, but this guy is still just a jobber. There's nothing really wrong with it, but there's nothing really right with it either. 5 out of 10. The health scaling is not nearly as bad as it is for Mine himself in the base game, but I'd still recommend coming into this one with a few attack upgrades, lest you run out of things to do by the end of the fight. I really don't have anything else to say on this guy. He's kind of just boring, but he's fine, I guess. 7 out of 10. The entire narrative purpose of Shinpei Ikari is that he does not have aura. His entire existence is to be a pallid nobody that Mine fucks over for no reason because he doesn't understand how the Yakuza works. This guy is a cardboard cutout, but it is on purpose, so I guess I can't be too harsh on him. Still, it is a bit disappointing that we didn't get a big cool fight to end off Dark Ties with. Why not have you fight Kiryu in the flashback sequence? It would have been a bit out of the blue, but I don't think many people would have complained about it. You could have had a cool new Receive You remix along with it too. I get that Dark Ties is an adaptation of an RGG Online story where the main gameplay is the insertion of your credit card information, but we can take a few liberties when we turn it into an actual game. At least Alone in the Darkness is really cool, even if the rest of the fight isn't. 2 out of 10. 24 out of 50 overall.
Come back when you're a little, richer.
Pirate Yakuza is maybe better than Gaiden. I don't know, I haven't contemplated which I like more. Really, I don't like thinking about either of them. Before the ground combo tech was discovered, I would definitely say Gaiden is better, but I don't know anymore. Juggling in this game just sucks. Rejuggling doesn't exist anymore, and you still have to deal with the juggle limit on top of that. The esoteric ground combo tech is nice to have, but it's still not going to help Pirate Yakuza's case that much. Sorry that I don't like a combo type that forces you to ration your hits like cans of beans after the Blitz. But unlike Gaiden, at least you have more than one option for combos, and attacks actually have hit stun, so 5 out of 10. Mad Dog is an infinitely more boring adaptation of a legacy style than Yakuza, but it is still functional. Sea Dog is just better than Agent in every conceivable way, however. Sea Dog is important for doing the really weird ground combo setup, and it theoretically can do rejuggles if those were at all consistent in this game. It is a bit lacking in terms of utility within ground combos though. Most of what you'll do in those comes from Mad Dog, which sucks because every single attack string in Mad Dog is almost the exact same. Yes, we will make 2ST a fast hit with a lot of hit stun. We'll make 3ST a fast hit with a lot of hit stun, and hear me out on this one, guys. We're gonna make 4ST a fast hit with a lot of hit stun. You can technically throw in some juggles within ground combos, but a C-tier combo type is not much improved by grafting a D-tier combo type to it. 5 out of 10. Raymond is... he's not that good, but there is worse. His spear phases are kind of extremely easy due to all of his attacks taking 3 years to come out. Yeah, they have a large range, meaning that they can clip you if you try to dodge, but just don't. Blocking is actually good in this game as long as you know how to perfect guard. His sword phase, on the other hand, is kinda bullshit, but also not that difficult. He has this one move that comes out really fast, which means you'll probably block it on reaction, but it's actually unblockable and has a follow-up that will immediately kill you if you dare block the first one. This technically isn't bad design, as it forces you to adapt to a different moveset with a different set of rules, but it's a very annoying thing to have to deal with at the very end of a no damage, and it doesn't help that the white aura that singles an unblockable is masked by his heat aura. In return, you do get the easiest ground combo setup of all time, I guess. Raymond is kinda just okay until his final phase where he becomes mildly annoying, but still not that bad. 7 out of 10. This is another fight where the main challenge comes from the fact that he has a lot of health, and that combos can be kinda finicky, not from the boss itself being all too challenging. I don't know what else you want me to say about Raymond Law. He's Raymond Law. 7 out of 10. What aura score do you think Raymond Law is going to get? The only final boss where my first thought after beating him was, that fight was alright. I wonder who the final boss is going to be. And I don't want to see any of ye landlubbers say, "Arr, it should have been Queen Michelle," as if that lassie's got anything more to bring to the table. Why wasn't it Shigaki? You could have done a whole twist on the whole Shishido thing since he's ex-Tojo. He could have showed up at the very end like, "No, Majima, we're taking this treasure because I literally lost everything after the Tojo dissolved," which, mind you, you played a part in facilitating. And then they have a cool, epic final battle, after which Majima lectures him about how chasing fishtails like secret pirate treasure isn't gonna get you anywhere, and that the real treasure is the friends we made along the way or some shit. Raymond would still be a serviceable secondary villain in this hypothetical, as it shows how an endless quest for something so unobtainable would only lead to destruction, and Shigaki's continued pursuit of the treasure would be nothing more than a fool's errand. They literally already do this with his character in a super half-baked way because Pirate Yakuza does not know how to capitalize on 90% of its good ideas! It wouldn't be a perfect ending, but it would make Pirate Yakuza's theme of acceptance actually make sense beyond the random Moby Dick reference, and it would actually somewhat tie into the overarching story about how different ex-Yakuza members are trying to make it in the world post-dissolution. The game literally already does this with the second Shigaki fight. He literally talks about how Majima ruins his life and he needs the money. The game talks about how much this guy resents Majima and he literally demands him for answers, and all Majima says is, I don't know, I got amnesias. I really want to like this game, but it makes it pretty hard sometimes. You could have given him a cool tattoo and the game could have ended with the obligatory shirtless beatdown! I'm supposed to be talking about Raymond Law. This guy genuinely has nothing other than the fact that he's played by Samoa Joe. No actual character traits other than greed, mid movesets, and his themes aren't even good. One of the titles is just a ripoff of Unwavering Belief. Get this poser out of my face. 1 out of 10. 25 out of 50 overall.
Oh, look, a school just blew up.
Well, apparently there was a bomb inside the building.
Have you ever wanted to play Yakuza 6, but boring? K2 is superficially better than Yakuza 6 due to the increased combo speed, but many game mechanics have been changed for the worse. All of the interesting combo types and setups to go along with them are gone. Now you just have a one-size-fits-all stun attack for free stun combos whenever you feel like it. The limited moveset of Yakuza 6 worked because of the variety of systems at play that allowed each move to have multiple different uses. But now that you're going to be doing the same thing over and over again ad nauseum, it just doesn't work nearly as well. Kiwami 2 functions, but by God is it boring. 6 out of 10. This is just the Yakuza 6 moveset again, except slightly faster, extreme heat can only be accessed at full heat, and half of your combo moves don't work anymore. The speed increase is nice, but losing things like your running attack and heavy kicks as viable combo tools is just depressing. Extreme Heat is easier to use in combos now too, but the activation barrier is a huge drawback. At least you have weapons in this game, which is nice. In some ways, this moveset is better than Yakuza 6, in some ways it's worse, and in many ways, it is far less interesting. 7 out of 10. Talk about overcompensation. OG Ryuji was extremely unfair and excruciatingly difficult, but Kiwami Ryuji is stupidly easy. He has a little bit of armor sometimes, but you are so much faster than him this time around that you can easily bait one of his super slow attacks and counter with a 50-second long stun combo. The only thing he's got going for him is his insane health pool, which causes the fight to drag for far longer than it needs to. By the third gray health bar, you've already done every possible combo in the game. I suppose that it's technically better than the original version because you can actually fight him and do combos, but I still have infinitely more respect for that one. 4 out of 10. Kiwami Ryuji isn't even like pretend hard. The hardest part is how long it takes if you don't juice up your attack power to an insane degree. Only final boss that you can no damage with one hand. Not that I have a reason to try, I prefer bears over dragons. 4 out of 10. Technically, most of the stuff that applies to the original fight still applies here. But this fight is kinda like the anti-Iwami. You're not supposed to shit on this guy this badly, yet unlike the original, you can do just that. Being able to go against the purpose of this fight so badly really hurts, even if Ryuji is still a cool character. Yes, him being more fair than the original is a good thing, but now that it doesn't provide a semblance of a challenge, it's not so much of a battle of equals anymore, is it? Also, notice how I had to use a mod to remove the "let's dump our game in a septic tank" filter. 5 out of 10. 26 out of 50 overall. Bryce's theme is too boring, he's not getting an intro. Infinite Wealth is still an RPG, meaning that it's still not ideal for no damage, but it is an improvement from Yakuza 7. Things like positioning matter a lot more, and with the game kinda just being easier in general, it does allow for more diverse strategies. Maxing out agility does work, but so does perma-stunning the boss so they can't do anything. Arguably the coolest new strategy is to utilize the new Sea God Talisman, which allows you to completely dodge an attack upon activating a perfect guard, which actually brings some technical skill into the mix on top of just game knowledge and good RNG, even if it is kind of really hard to use. Still not gonna rank it too high due to RPGs just not meshing too well with the entire concept of no damages to begin with, and even with the improvements, the actual strategies still feel rather cheesy. Still probably the best an RPG can get in this category though. 7 out of 10. The player moveset category still doesn't make much sense in this context. Not applicable, out of 10. Bryce is a multi-phase group fight where he lobs bombs at you and also has guns. This sounds terrible, but is actually saved by being an RPG boss, where you don't have to actually maneuver around those things. The first 2 phases are just waves of ads before you actually fight Bryce in the 3rd phase. The first 2 phases don't have anything too special about them, so long as you kill everyone quickly enough, but you pretty much have to have Bryce paralyzed for the entire 3rd phase in order for a successful no damage, because no amount of talismans is going to help you dodge this. Unfortunately, paralysis is quite RNG dependent, so there's no guarantee you're going to make it out anyway. There's technically also Bryce's final phase where he switches to the sword, but this is more of a narrative tool than an actual phase, especially considering how late it activates. 6 out of 10. Once again, the difficulty of an RPG no damage all depends on how many busted moves you want to spam and how many pound mates you want to summon. You can potentially make this fight stupidly difficult if you purposely avoid the broken stuff, or you can squad wipe all of the phases instantly. Normally, I'd give it a 7 as a kind of baseline for good but not great, but the fact that you're restricted to one strategy for the final phase to avoid Bryce's AoE attacks is knocking off some points. 5 out of 10. In terms of aura farming, Bryce is one of the most prolific characters in the entire series. The catch is that he can't back it up at all. This man literally pretends to be God, but put his back to the wall and he'd rather choose death than suffer an aura loss. Know a few guys like that in real life. This man is a fraud. Yeah, that's kind of the point, but if you're genuinely concerned about an accurate and in-depth aura rating for Bryce Fairchild in my Yakuza final boss ranking, that says a lot more about you than me. 4 out of 10. 22 out of 40, or 27.5 out of 50 overall.
Take action regarding that individual.
それじゃあ現場捜査の時の感覚数十年ぶりに味わってもらいましょうか。
やれこいつは早く殺せ。
副総監いや宗像静四郎お前の野望はここで終わりだ。覚悟しろ。
Bet you weren't expecting to see this guy all the way up in the C tier. Yakuza 4 is essentially just a slightly worse version of Yakuza 3, and the various engine changes affect some characters more than others. Knockdown combos are far less effective due to the removal of the ability to gut stun an enemy in a knockdown state, alongside bosses being able to activate knockdown reversals on a wider array of hit reactions. I also feel like this game overcorrected for Yakuza 3's low damage. Damage in this game is through the roof, especially for heat actions, leading to very short and easy fights. Still, using Yakuza 3 as a base is really good, so this is quite good as well. 8 out of 10. Tanimura is really cool. He's a nice middle ground between the easy death combos of Akiyama and the sink-or-swim god tech for Saejima that requires you to quantum tunnel your fingers through your controller. He's got some cool combos with somewhat involved execution, though his moveset is a bit limited due to the lack of double finishers or reversals. Plenty of heat actions though, 7 out of 10. Yeah, this is where most of the points are getting docked. It's Munakata. You basically get no room to do any of the cool stuff, and even if you get down to just Munakata, he has knockdown immunity, which is normally not a huge deal since you can just parry them into the wall, but you can't parry Munakata, so you can't combo him very well. That's not to mention the 5 trillion bodyguards you have to go through before even getting to him, all while he sits in the back taking pot shots. What makes this fight that much more insulting is the fact that Tanimura only has one other boss. While I understand the narrative function that this fight serves, it's still pretty disappointing as the final boss, and forces a very linear and repetitive game plan if you don't cheese it with weapons. Only not a 0, cause at least it's not Jingu. 1 out of 10. In a twisted way, the real appeal of no-damaging Munakata is its sheer difficulty. Easily one of the hardest bosses to no-damage in the series, and while routing a no-damage for this fight is not nearly the same as others, the unique way you must approach the fight does give it some points as a niche but extra hard challenge. It more so tests general game sense as opposed to tech skill. Still not something I'd recommend for the faint of heart, or most people really, but it's a neat challenge. 5 out of 10. Absolutely impossible for me to give this fight a low aura rating. The atmosphere of this fight is going to hard carry this score though, as the fight doesn't have much going on from a technical perspective. You're forced to play defense the entire time, which is far from the most hype thing in the world. Like I said, Munakata himself can't even be comboed outside of one super specific setup. You can maybe go for some cool stuff on the captain if you save him for last, but saving a glorified ad for last is lame! Still, the absolute pathos of this fight is so legendary with the story context, the amazing intro and QTE, and of course, For Faith, that I'm still willing to give it a 7. Could have been an 8 if it was the lyrical version. 28 out of 50 overall.
Please, Pete, I need this! My mom is kind of homeless.
Same as Bryce, 7 out of 10. This category still does not work, not applicable out of 10. Ebina is an actual 1v1, or 4v1 fight, unlike Bryce. And to his credit, he's a much more interesting boss than Tendo is. But unfortunately, being a solo boss is kind of a death sentence in Like a Dragon Infinite Stunlocks. The strategy for this fight is, much like Bryce, prevent him from doing anything by paralyzing him and pelting him with as many nuclear explosions as you can. What's more is that if you use substitution jutsu on Sun-Hee and Sayako, you can give Kiryu triple turns for him to hyper buff himself and make Ebina dissolve faster than the Tojo and Omi. Ebina is technically a pretty interesting boss, but the best strat is to avoid letting him do any of his cool stuff at all costs by gambling on him not being able to escape his paralysis. No Yakuza game is really meant to be no-damaged, but you can tell that that is especially so for the RPG games, because the average no-damage is just the illusion of free choice. 6 out of 10. Depending on whether you go for the Paralysis strat or the Sea God Talisman strat, this fight is either easy on paper but kind of an RNG nightmare, or brutally difficult. Neither of which are ideal. Just give it another 4, man, I don't know. Ebina is kind of a nothing burger of a character, but admittedly, he does do a lot with the little bit of time he gets to actually do stuff. This dude flies around and does somersaults and shit, and does whatever the hell this is with Kiryu, only final boss brave enough to try docking with the protagonist mid-fight. But unfortunately, this man's #1 weakness is a SpongeBob background character, meaning that you never get to see any of it. 6 out of 10. 23 out of 40, or 28.75 out of 50 overall.
And fuck the shirt and pants, bitch! I'm here to fight the fucking haters!
What's right?
Yakuza 0 is kind of a middle ground between the systems of 3/4 and 5/Ishin. No more wall splats, bounding makes a return, knockdowns are now fully gone, and back combos are back to fully working 20% of the time. Being able to actually do back combos is great, but it's kind of the only thing you have going on outside of very short wall bounds. And the fact that they only work sometimes doesn't help either. 5 out of 10. Majima is easily the worst of the two playable characters in Zero. This is primarily because he doesn't have quick change clothes, which is pretty much mandatory for Kiryu. Majima has a much harder time utilizing his different styles due to the inability to style switch cancel. But he does have something else to make some style switch combos possible, and also make back combos much more consistent. His Slugger style switch attack is frame 1, causes a ton of hit stun, and forces enemies to not turn around. Where was that in the Majima Saga, dipshit? That's neat, but the amount of things he can actually convert off of in back combos is still quite limited, and not even helped much by a boss having knockdown immunity. 6 out of 10. Laogue is kind of like Takechi. Not the bad one, the good one which we'll talk about in a bit. His knife phase can be annoying due to his huge hitboxes and some unreactable attacks, but it's not too bad. His second phase is literally just Takechi's wild dance phase all over again, but you can actually do combos on him, so it's not quite as bad. You're still equally as likely to get shot out of nowhere, but it's technically a bit better. His unarmed phase is easily the most balanced, but still provides some challenge due to his large hitboxes. 2 pretty well-designed phases and 1 diet Takechi. 7 out of 10. Laogue is of course one of the most cheesable final bosses, but when playing normally, he's definitely on the harder side. If you were playing as someone else, say Kiryu, I think Laogue would be pretty moderate in terms of difficulty, but with Majima being as limited as he is, the difficulty of the fight is a bit inflated. What difficulty is there is rather cheap and frustrating, which will knock some points off, but still pretty good. 7 out of 10. Extremely mid. The Laogue fight doesn't really do anything wrong, it just doesn't tick many of the no damage boxes of coolness. Arch Nemesis is a theme that does its job, and Laogue is more of a symbol than an intriguing character. On top of that, Majima is more so fighting for his life than anything, and his combos being very slow and methodical doesn't help much either. 4 out of 10. 29 out of 50 overall.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you are a grown-ass man, right?
Hey everybody, sorry to cheap out of doing another intro, but I already had the one for this segment made, but Premiere just fucking crashed on me randomly and deleted the entire thing. So, it's keto. It's keto. 8 for game mechanics, as previously discussed. Saejima is the most polarized character in the series. He's very slow and lacking in options, and overall just not built for no damage. That said, he's also the most technically demanding character in the series, with charge cancelling and charge storage being extremely esoteric and difficult to apply. Without them, you're restricted to very short and rudimentary back and knockdown combos. With some of his advanced tech, Saejima is a much more interesting character, but it's so difficult to use that it's out of the question for all but the most dedicated sweats. It's better to have than not, but it's not gonna help us score all that much. 6 out of 10. Kido is very mediocre as far as final bosses go. His moveset is not threatening at all, with the only real issue being his heat mode where he becomes more aggressive and gains knockdown immunity. Saejima has a really hard time against knockdown immunity, but Kido has one saving grace. His running attack has a really poor hitbox and a lot of end lag, allowing you to safely charge as Charge T, which ignores knockdown immunity, and is one of Saejima's best ways to start knockdown combos. The reward you get from this also varies greatly depending on how good you are with the charging techs. Saejima also really appreciates having walls, which Kido's arena completely lacks. You're going to be relying on heat action spam for damage here, as combos are very short and inconsistent. Once again, not counting the charge techs. 5 out of 10. Kido would be stupidly easy if you were playing as anyone other than Saejima. Even then, he's still not hard at all. Saejima does so much damage that they had to give him a healing phase just so the fight could last longer. While some of Kito's attacks come out decently fast, they're all quite committal and very predictable. 5 out of 10. In a series full of aura farmers, Kito completely fails to provide anything in terms of aura. Any coolness that this fight has is provided solely by Fourfaith and Saejima. Kito is the least threatening guy in the whole game. He has a grab that causes him to eat shit if he misses, and his QTE consists of him getting repeatedly decked by Saejima before he hits him with the Akuma Raging Demon pose. The coolest thing that happens in this fight is when Kito heals, which allows you to charge up alongside him. Admittedly, that is raw as hell and will help the score considerably, but there's not much else going on here. If you're actually able to master the Saejima tech, then Kito could be a really cool showcase of that, but no one has yet, which means this fight is super boring to watch. Whether or not you think yelling at another man about his testicles constitutes aura is something I will defer to my viewers. 5 out of 10. 29 out of 50 overall.